Okay, structure. Of DNA. We already know that DNA, the job of DNA, is to build proteins. And we've said that there's about 30,000 different proteins in the human body. Remember that the DNA is contained in the nucleus, and it's wound up very tightly in chromosomes, and those chromosomes are packed super tightly together because they're in such a small space and they carry huge amounts of information. One of the things that helps wrap DNA up like a rubber band twisted hundreds of times are these proteins that are embedded in the structure of DNA. And I'll just draw that as maybe a blue dot here. Those proteins are called histone proteins, and one of their jobs is to help wrap DNA up. Histone proteins. They kind of help DNA stick together. They also serve a regulatory function. They help genes turn on and turn off. And these histone proteins were just recently discovered as being something that helps DNA function a lot more than we thought they did before. Well, let's unravel a piece of this DNA and look at it a little bit more closely. Each strand of DNA, if you looked at it closely, we're going to make an enlargement now of this strand here. That's an arrow. So we're just taking this circle, this little chunk of DNA, and looking at it and seeing what it looks like. If we looked at it closely, that little chunk of DNA we would find that there's actually, instead of a single strand or a single chunk of DNA, it's actually two-stranded. It's double-stranded, and they're twisted together. So DNA, and this, by the way, of course, is chromosomes. One chromosome. And if we looked at it more closely, we would see that it's a DNA molecule. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and I'm going to explain in just a second through drawings what that means for you. But for now, let's just say that if we enlarged it, that's what it would look like. Let's flip this page. I don't think I can flip that. So, is everybody done drawing this part of it? What we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at this chunk here. on the next page, that's another arrow. Take a look at that chunk right there, and we're going to enlarge it so that it's bigger on this next page here. Is it okay for me to turn the page? Okay, wait a little longer. Okay, so we're going to enlarge that now and find out that DNA is actually held together by these little dashes there. I'll explain what those are in a second. So these purple dashes represent a molecule called thymine. And thymine always bonds to this green molecule here called adenine. Okay. The yellow molecules here, this blue molecule here is guanine, and this is all arbitrary, guanine, the color is. And the yellow is cytosine. So if we really take a look at this, A always bonds with T, and C always bonds with G, always. So DNA rungs of the ladder are made of A's, T's, C's, and G's bonded together. Okay? And that makes up the rungs of the ladder. if we looked at that a little bit more closely, that just describes the rungs. There's also the backbone. Of DNA. The backbone of DNA is this part right here, and this part right here. These two long purple lines here, that represents the backbone. The backbone is made of two things. Two molecules. One is called a deoxyribose sugar molecule. And the second part of the backbone is called a phosphate group. And here's how it looks. Here's one backbone. And we're going to draw. And this is often called the 5C, or the 5-carbon sugar. We're going to draw the 5-carbon sugar first. So there's the 5-carbon sugar. Attached to the 5-carbon sugar is the phosphate group. And we're going to symbolize that with a P for phosphate. And there's another 5-carbon sugar here. With a phosphate group on it. And on down the line. Well, where does the backbone come in? The backbone comes in right here. You might have a purple thymine bonded on there, so that's a T. And over here you might have a yellow cytosine on here. So that's a C. If that's a C and that's a T, then on the other side of those would be an A, an adenine for this one here. Adenine is green. It's kind of hard to tell. So there's an A, a nitrogen base A. And guess what? It's attached to a 5-carbon sugar on the other side of this backbone. So that's 5C there. And attached to the C on the other side is a G, or a guanine. Here comes the guanine. So really, when you look at it, this part is the backbone here. There's two sides, backbone here. And these are the rungs of the ladder, the double helix, the double spiral ladder. These are the rungs. The nitrogen bases are the rungs. This whole thing right here this whole thing, a phosphate group, a sugar, and a nitrogen base, that's given a special name that we're going to see called a nucleotide. Nucleotide. So one nucleotide is a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogen base together. The nitrogen base is the only thing that changes between one nucleotide and the next. And there's 4 different flavors of nucleotides. Okay? That is the basic structure of DNA. Tomorrow we'll get into exactly how DNA codes for the protein. Okay? Any questions?